Excellent. Thank you all for joining us. Oh, there's Silver. Wonderful. It is excellent to have you with us. So for the agenda today, we're doing things a little bit out of order because Lieutenant Mozan, Lieutenant, right?
Yes.
Lieutenant Mozan has other obligations tonight, so we're trying to get him in as early as possible. So bump the liaison report down to just before closing comments instead of just after opening comments. And we've got the chief's report a little bit later than usual. Other than that, we've got a couple of things, an informational session on the illegal camping response status update, in the ongoing saga that included St. Vincent de Paul, and some things have changed. And with COVID still laying waste to so much of America, looking at what's going on in the illegal camping sphere and the EPD's involvement there. And then we have a big policy review for field force. It's going to be nuanced and important, so I'm hoping we can get a big bite out of that. And it might eat into determining a retreat date down near the end, so I put that later in the agenda. We've got 3 days. It's usually held on a Saturday. So other than the one by Mother's Day, we got May 1st, 15th, and 22nd. So yeah. Do I have any objections to the existing agenda, or can I move forward with this?
Oh, can we, I have questions for the update of homelessness, so I would love to be able to have that time if that's possible.
Yeah, we should have plenty of time for answering questions in that 45 minutes assigned for the response status update.
Okay.
So it shouldn't just be informational presentation. We should have time for questions there.
Yep.
As well. If we do have any public comments, please, go ahead and raise your hand in the attendees. I will call on you as we go forward. But seeing no objections, I'm going to take it as universal consent for the agenda moving forward. And we're going to jump right into commissioner comments until I see if any hands come up for public comments, which I'm not seeing yet. So to start off with, let's start with you, Amanda, and then move on to V.
Okay. I don't have any comments other than I'm sorry I missed the last meeting, but nice to see you all again.
Good to see you too. V, and then Dallas.
Not much to say other than happy Lunar New Year to everyone. Tomorrow is the first day of the Lunar New Year. Jen, I see you're dressed in pink, and red. That's the perfect color for New Year. Anyway, that's pretty much it. Thank you.
What animal is it?
Just the iron ox. So I would imagine that would be a year for building relationship. It's good for being industrious, that sort of thing.
Thanks, V. Dallas, and then Ian.
I have no comments at this time.
Excellent. Ian, and then Jennifer.
Hey, everyone. Great to see you. I just wanted to give folks a heads up that I've provided Jeremy with a list of the food drive for Food for Lane County that's happening this Saturday from 12 to 4 in neighborhoods around the city. We're doing this individual neighborhood associations and the Neighborhood Leaders Council in partnership with Food for Lane County, because it's a particularly difficult time of year for Food for Lane County to get donations. Once the holiday season ends, there's they call it donation atrophy. Just people get a little bit tired. They can't donate as much food and money. So it's just a critical time for our community, and there's really, really high need. I know that one member of our community has already reached out to Chief Skinner, so we might see him and his wife on Saturday. And so anyone who's interested, y'all can reach out to Jeremy, and he can provide you with both the list of the 12 locations around the city, as well as Food for Lane County's most wanted list, things that are high protein, shelf stable, pasta, rice, oatmeal, chiles, mole, spices, canned vegetables and beans, and then monetary donations are always accepted.
Sweet. Thanks, Ian. Jennifer, and then Chantel.
I do not have anything really. Thanks, V, for mentioning the Lunar New Year. It's going to be a rough weekend not being able to see family as normal for those who celebrate it, but I'm glad to see all of you here today.
Thanks, Jennifer. Chantel and then Lindsay.
Hey everyone. I don't have much to say either, other than, it's Black History Month. And I can say, at least from my daughter's schooling, is that they're incorporating it much more than past years. So I think if one thing BLM has got accomplished this year is education and, teaching our kid about a lot of Black activists. So I'm pretty happy about that.
Wonderful. Lindsay and then Silver.
Hi everyone, glad to be here tonight. Glad to see you all. I don't have anything specific to add until the liaison report.
Thanks, Lindsay. Silver and then Bonnie.
Yeah, I don't have anything really to report at this time. I'm not feeling well, so I probably won't be on for very long. My apologies.
Sorry to hear that. Thanks, Silver. Bonnie and then Alan.
I just have a little bit of news. So the mayor of Roseburg, Larry Rich, if I'm not mistaken, he said that he can't do anything about homelessness right now because people are complaining about homeless people. So I just wanted to read something real quick. Under Eugene City Code 4.815, prohibited camping, it says, under 3, it says, no person shall camp in or upon any sidewalk, etc., park or any publicly owned property, unless otherwise specifically authorized by this code or by declaration of the mayor in emergency circumstances. So this is Eugene City Code. So the mayor can do the same thing that Larry Rich did from Roseburg. Additionally, under 4, it says, upon finding it to be in the public interest and consistent with the council goals and policies, the council may by motion exempt the special event from the prohibitions of this section. I'd say that COVID is a very interesting event in history and could also fall under that. And then additionally, the CDC says, under considerations for encampment, says, if individual housing options are not available, allow people who are living unsheltered or in encampments to remain where they are. Clearing encampments can cause people to disperse throughout the community and break connections with service providers. This increases the potential for infectious diseases and spread. And by having police, I don't think that the police should be doing this at all. We should, the police shouldn't be involved in this. We are putting police officers at risk. We're putting people that are homeless at risk. And then we're also putting the community of house people also at risk because they also happen to interact with police officers. So I just feel like I wish that this wasn't an issue and that our mayor would do what Larry Rich did from Roseburg and just make this not an issue for the police to be handling. We have a lot of other things like COVID has, like I said before, domestic violence is a big thing. And I'd like us to be able to focus on that instead of having to focus on homelessness, which again, I'm sure that I used to want to be in law enforcement. I definitely didn't think that I would want to be, moving people, homeless people around. Like that wouldn't be why I wanted to get into law enforcement. So that's all I have to say about that. Thank you. And sorry, this is prompted also by a lot of, I've been talking to homeless people and I've been talking to people that have been working with homeless people. And it's like, I'm embarrassed that I stopped following this for a little while and just with a little bit of, like, because I closed my mind off to it for a little while, like, just a lot of stuff is still happening and it's just kind of sad. And yeah, so that's all.
Thanks, Bonnie. Alan?
Yeah, thanks. It is Black History Month. There's 2 events coming up, by the way. There's everything's virtual, of course. So the Freedom Fund fundraiser on the 19th for NAACP, and then on the 18th is a seminar by the LCC Black Student Union, putting the African in Black History Month. Historian Tony Browder is going to talk. And both those should be interesting.
All right, you got it.
Other than that, I don't have anything else. Thanks.
Thank you. So for my part, I'd like to encourage everybody to reach out to your networks and tell everybody you know that boards and commissions are open for application. So this is an incredibly important time to help infuse new folks into all of Eugene's boards and commissions. Obviously, we don't have an opening this time around because we filled so many last time, but there are numerous ones that are open, and I will have to attach a link to the website a little bit later as I find it. But please, 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 best way to get other folks involved is by speaking to them as a friend about stuff they can do to change the community. So thank you. So I'm still not seeing any public comments, no hands raised. So we are going to jump straight into Lieutenant Mozan. Thank you so much for joining us. Can we jump into the illegal camping response status update?
Hi, folks. Can you hear me all right?
We're hearing you fine.
Okay, perfect. So I'm Lieutenant Doug Mozan. I'm the day watch commander between Sunday and Wednesday, and I have the honor and a cross of managing all things camping response. So our officers and as CSOs respond to homeless camping day in and day out in a number of ways. The majority of our interactions with those who are unhoused are in the form of calls for service and responses to behaviors of the people that are unhoused. I heard an amazing and very poignant description recently from a city councilor who said it's important to delineate between condition and behavior. Condition, that is being unhoused and being homeless, and behavior that is doing something that might be illegal. So our laws in the city of Eugene, as you know, do prohibit camping in the sense that it's a violation of municipal code, but not a crime. It's something that's punishable by a fine, but not by jail time. So for that reason, there is some case law in the Ninth Circuit that prohibits criminal enforcement of unhoused as a status or condition. However, in the violation realm, it's okay. All that said, we have parked our camping response for several months due to the COVID pandemic and our desire to allow people to shelter in place and to prevent people from moving around and potentially spreading COVID amongst campers and that sort of thing. So when we're talking about camping, prohibited camping as an ordinance or as a condition, it's something that occurs in two different theaters. It occurs on public land or public right-of-way, such as parks or city open space. And it also occurs on private property, such as, say, the railroad or open fields that are owned by business developers or any number of other places. When we're dealing with private property, that offense is usually called trespass. And so the status of being unhoused doesn't really matter in that sense because they've situated themselves on someone else's property. And it's our duty to help that property owner get them out. We often try to do that with a warning, and when we're not successful, we'll often go back through and take enforcement action, usually in a progressive way, starting with citations and moving on to custody arrests if we're unsuccessful. In public space, we've been fairly successful sometimes in leaving people in place, except we've noticed that of late in the last year and a half, when we allow encampments to be on public land, they tend to grow. I mean, people seek community in normal human behavior, and so we see communities forming. And so when you look at something like 5 in Fillmore, 5 in El Maiden, you have a couple of campers that soon turn into about 20 campers, and then you have improvised structures and tents, and it turns into a much less orderly situation, and then the behaviors start to cause impacts on the neighborhood. By behaviors, I mean things like accumulations of garbage, human waste that's deposited in people's planters or in rights of way, because not everybody has a place to go. Stolen property like bike frames, needles, and other things that accumulate around folks who have no place to stay. When those behaviors get to a certain point, we have to either mitigate them by cleaning or sometimes by closure. Now, I've asked Jeremy to share with you a document that illustrates a new way that the city manager's office and what we call the homeless operations team. We've been working together as a team to try to mitigate some of these behaviors, and we've created a scoring matrix with a number of factors that inform whether or not we're going to close a camp or whether we're going to allow that camp to stay in place. And the first thing we do is we have somebody from either Public Works or Parks, depending on the situation, go out and take a look, and they score the camp based on the accumulation of garbage, unsanitary conditions, blocking rights of way, safety hazards such as electrical cords in the roadway, presence of rodents, presence of other environmental hazards. And when when we can, we ask people to mitigate these things. What we say, hey, you need to take the tarps off the fence. You need to remove this garbage. You need to tighten it up, and we'll let you stay. But if you can't do that, then we're going to have to close and clean, or close, period. So that's the kind of the new approach, and the EPD are not the lead on that process. And it's kind of a nice thing to have that weight lifted off of our shoulders in one respect, and in the other, when it's time to close, at times we're necessary to actually enforce the closure and to get people to move along. So when you hear things about sweeps and about the police going in and cleaning house, sometimes it's not us. Sometimes it's Public Works that are actually going in there and trying to change a set of behaviors to manage a condition and allow the condition to remain benign. And then other times it's something where it's a trespass, and we're the lead, and we're actually dealing with the trespass in a graduated way. We always try with warnings. If that's not successful, we try with tickets. And if tickets aren't successful, then eventually we may take a custody or two. But I haven't encountered a camping situation in a trespass where we had to, where we went in there and took everybody to jail. It just hasn't happened.
Excellent. Can we pause here? Does anybody have any questions so far on what's being presented? I see V, and then Alan, and then Bonnie, and then Dallas.
So Lieutenant Mosen, when you said that, when the camps have to be closed down and these folks are being asked to leave and move along, where do they move to?
Well, that's a good question. And it's a well-known fact that the city of Eugene has a number of options, shelter options for the unhoused. And yet it's also well known that we don't have enough. We have the Dawn to Dawn shelter along 99, which normally houses about 240 souls. And when COVID hit, they had to reduce that census down to 150. And they've been diligently trying to expand that number back up by expanding their footprint and by adding things like the pallet shelters and other tents to bring their numbers up. I'm not sure what their status is tonight. I do know that that there is a process by which people have to go up and sign up at the $450.99 at the service station. We tell people about this. And then they have to get on a waiting list and stick around so that if their number gets called, they get to go into the shelter. So that process itself is a barrier. I mean, there's folks who aren't used to waiting in lines. They're not used to going through a bureaucratic process and an iterative thing like that. And so it's difficult for some folks to manage that situation. Add to that the fact that many of them have dogs. Dogs aren't allowed in that shelter. Or they have, other, they maybe are with a partner and they don't want to be apart from their partner. And that shelter is segregated by sex for logistical reasons, just like the Mission, which is another option. The Eugene Mission is a phenomenal facility. It is leaps and bounds from where it was 20 years ago when I was a new cop. And yet it is impacted seriously by COVID in terms of its census and in terms of its ability to serve those with barriers. So that brings us to tent shelters. So we're in this place where we have the very lowest of low barrier shelters is a tent, and we have no place where people can legitimately camp in tents yet. And we're working on that. We've been talking about it literally for years in this homeless operations team and with the city council, city manager's office. And we have some diligent, hardworking folks who have created these microsites of pallet shelters and of Conestoga huts. You'll see them in Skinnersby Park. By the Skinner City Farm. You'll see them up on Empire Park, off 99. You'll see them down near Westmoreland Park, and in a number of other locations where we're trying to get these innovative approaches put up. But the people that are put in those sites are sort of the highest functioning of the unhoused. So we're in this place where it's very difficult to serve the folks with the most barriers, or with the most difficult, or with the most behaviors that go along with their condition. And that might be drug use or other comorbid things like mental illness, or criminal factors, that probation status, sex offender status, other things that make it complicated to serve them.
Thank you. You also, if I can just ask a follow-up question. So you mentioned that there are sign-up process to get into one of the opening, slots that they can camp at. I've noticed some folks camping in groups on West 11, kind of on the side of
Beltline.
And if they don't have transportation, if they're, if they have a bike, I don't know how they can make it all the way across town. I can't. So I'm wondering, how do they sign up? Is there a way they can sign up, or is there transportation that the city or the department or whichever agencies working with them at the time can offer them transportation to get the sign up process?
So good question. It's Vi, right?
It's V.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
So the people that live outside tend to be fairly resourceful. In my experience, they're dialed into LTD as bus services. Many of them have bus passes, either free and reduced bus passes, or they manage bus fare the way they need to. LTD has the ability to transport bicycles. They're not so easy on pets, but I think they do take some pets if the rider says they're a service animal and they're reasonably well behaved. And there happens to be an MX bus shelter right next to that camp. That camp you're talking about is situated on a piece of county property, and it has devolved from a couple of tents. I call it Camp No Camping because there's a no camping sign in the middle of it that the county put up years ago. And when that camp started, it was when we were first starting our EOC for the pandemic, and the county was running their operation, the city was running their operation in two silos. And we both, the only thing we agreed upon was that we were trying to leave unhoused in place. So the camp stayed, it grew from 2 tents to 4 tents, from 4 tents to 6 tents to 20 tents to wherever it is right now. And unfortunately, the trash has accumulated, the waste is accumulated, the environmental hazards. We've had things like dead chickens and all kinds of funky stuff in there. And the county owns that property, and we've been trying to get them to close it or to give us permission to deal with it to mitigate the environmental hazards for a while, and we haven't had a lot of traction. So eventually we had a couple of meetings with elected officials, with Commissioner Buck, and with our city councilors and with Mayor Vinnis, where we've got some very thoughtful approaches in play. But they were hoping to have that thing closed by January 22nd. It didn't come to be. I don't know where they're at right now. I do know that we've put sanitation stations nearby, but like Walmart wouldn't let us put sanitation stations on their parking lot because they don't want these people in their parking lot, even though they are every day. It's one of these things where we just can't seem to get any traction. We asked the adjacent property owner to the west if they would allow us to put sanitation on their property because you could access it by a truck. This is the old Eugene Speedway. And they said no. So at some point it's going to close and we're going to clear those people out. And the county is, the reason why it hasn't closed is the county is diligently trying to find a place where they can legitimately tell people to go, which I think is the right thing to do. But also the thing to do is to clean it up while it sits. And that hasn't happened yet. So I think we need to get in there and with a cleaning crew or a work crew or something to mitigate the trash hazard and tighten things up while they're there.
Thank you. So we're going to have to go pretty quickly to make sure we fit everybody's questions and stuff in. I've got Alan on the queue next, and after that, I've got Bonnie.
Yeah, Lieutenant, there seems to be a lot of fundamental misunderstanding about what the law says, and in particular, the Boise case. And maybe you could clarify the difference between criminal and violation, and
certainly.
And with that what the Boise case said, because homelessness or camping isn't a criminal offense; it's a violation, more like a traffic violation, but people get confused about that.
Yeah, correct.
And how the police.
So in Boise, they had a federal case that was based on a criminal offense that they had for a status offense of homeless camping. And so they had campers in public spaces who were arrested for refusing to leave those public spaces, and they didn't have any place to go. And so a 3-judge appellate panel of the Ninth Circuit stated that if there is no legitimate place to put people, then you can't arrest them for being in a public place and camping. And so that is sort of a landmark case that's affected the entire West Coast. And it has essentially put the brakes on a lot of camping enforcement in a lot of jurisdictions. In Eugene, we're unique because a few years ago, we changed and when I say a few, I mean about 15 or 20. I started, it was a criminal offense, and about a third of the way through my career, it was a violation. So in Eugene, it's a violation offense. It's the same as if you were crossing against a light, or if you were, I guess now using heroin in public or something. So it's a deal where you can't actually be arrested. So and for that reason, we're not in violation of the Boise case by taking enforcement action and writing tickets for it. The other thing that people need to know is that there's some folks who are very frustrated because they say, well, listen, I have this camper in front of my business and it's affecting my business, and you've written tickets and nothing's happened. When are you going to take them to jail? And we tell them, listen, we can't take them to jail. It's a status offense. And if they don't pay the ticket or don't show up to court, there's no follow through on there. It goes to collections, and the court says, well, you owe us $150, but there's no real teeth to that law. So because of the futility of the violation situation there, we don't write so many of those tickets. We only write them to folks who are intentional scofflaws and who are trying to challenge our process, I guess. And we had a couple of those where they were sort of quasi activists, and they got a lot of tickets. And frankly, that was a fairly futile situation. It always resulted in a closure, cleaning, and tens of hours of city time and thousands of dollars in public resources for nothing, really.
Yeah.
Really frustrating.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and we've had that conversation here at the police commission before a lot of the new folks got on about people racking up violation after violation after violation. It really doesn't do much good to give them another violation or fine them, because they don't have any income anyway. So giving them another fine that they can't pay doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, correct. And while we're at it,
one final point.
Go ahead.
Right.
Oh, I was going to say, we used to have a contract with St. Vincent de Paul to mitigate car camping, and that contract is now gone. So we have some policy that's going to need some adjustment. I mean, our current approach to warning and connection with services and subsequent enforcement is probably merits a little bit of revisiting, because we're not really going to be point on those situations. So for instance, if the city manager's team of outreach went in and talked to somebody, and a public works team went in and talked to somebody, that might be a week's time or a week and a half. So by the time the police get involved in the quantum, to add 3 days with our process might be unreasonable before we try to mitigate something with a citation or with a camp closure. As we refine these processes with the city manager's office, I'll probably be coming to you as a body to help guide the development of a new policy that is in alignment with that rubric that we shared on Jeremy's screen earlier. If that makes sense.
Thank you. So I've got
Yeah,
Bonnie
it
on
does.
the.
And final point about just one point. The big issue about where to put them is finding places to put them. I mean, we have 9 rest stops now. We just added 5, but it's taken us years to actually get that going. And so it's just very, very difficult to get community acceptance about a homeless camp because they tend to be messy and other things that go on with them. People don't understand them. They think they're all criminals. And so there's all this prejudice against it, but it's just incredibly difficult to find spots. And car camping, another example. The problem with the car camping problem is we just don't have enough spots. We just can't get places to put them and get people to do it.
Car camping is the one delineation that's a little different. That along with the Boise decision is a violation on the first offense, but willful camping in the same spot becomes criminal, and that's only because there's a presumption that a car camper can move that car and go somewhere else and set up shop. So they're presumed to be a little bit more mobile than a tent. So that's one delineation I forgot to mention.
Yeah, thanks.
So I've got Bonnie and then Dallas and then myself. Bonnie? Oh, and then Amanda.
Yes, so I'm just wondering how much are citations and what kind of citations are you putting out there? Like, what is the range of like the cost and the type of citations?
Well, when we write a homeless camping citation, I think it's 150 on the bail. That's not the fine. It's a presumptive fine, but when somebody appears in court, they may be fined $25 or community service or any number of things.
I was reading in an article by, I don't know, one of the local news people, and it said that like a little old lady was charged $790. She was located at in the Train Song area. So can you speak to that?
Well, if she were camping outside of a park, that might be a violation of park rules, and that can be a more expensive. That's actually a criminal offense.
My understanding is it was a trespass because it was on the property of the train. What is it? What's the train?
Yeah,
station?
she was in the railroad property, so that's a criminal trespass one. And that one I think is a $500 bail amount, but it's not, or it could be $790, but it's not it's still not a fine.
Okay,
it would take $790 to get her out of jail if you were arrested.
Okay, so I don't know if she was actually arrested. So somebody that's homeless, how do they ever get out of jail if they can't? Like, I don't know how bail works. Luckily, I have never had to.
Our jails as affected as by COVID as everywhere else, and they get kicked out in the next morning usually.
Okay, but then she still has that charge that's waiting for her at some point, I guess. Like, I
She's
don't know.
gonna she'd have to appear in court at some point and see a judge. That's the due process part of criminal.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. So I've got Dallas, myself, and then Amanda.
This discussion about the homeless, in my opinion, and what are we going to do, to combat the problem? I see a major leadership problem. It's a leadership problem because the reason why I say that is this. When you were talking, Doug, when we talked about, when you talk with the campers, we're talking about the process is too long. That we were talking about no place for the dogs, tarps, and drug use. And this, the point I'm trying to get to is, for us to solve the problem, we had to dig deep in the core of humanity, the core of who we are, and say basic things like, why are you homeless? When was the last time we got, say, 15 or 20 or whatever, maybe buy them lunch or whatever and bring them all in, bring quite a few in and say, why are you homeless? And we write down all these reasons. For us, it should be, how can we help you? Because if we don't get to the core, the root core, how can we help you? Why are you homeless? To find out what that information is, all the stuff that we're talking about, doesn't matter who the chief of police is, doesn't matter what the situation is, this is a round and around and around and around problem that will never be solved. And then when we talk about this land and so forth, it's almost like the idea is like, not in my backyard, not in my backyard. Well, the people will have to have a place to go. We would have to be able to take them there. They should have a decent tent, not some tarp or something. And then we should involve social workers. We should involve businesses. We should involve churches. We should involve government. We should involve nonprofits. If we're not willing to step up in a leadership way to solve it that way, whatever we see now, we'll see next month. You'll see it 6 months from now. You'll see it from a year from now. We'll be 2 years. And all of us will be 10 years older, and it will never, nothing will change.
You're right. Yeah, that was very poignant. And that's the same conversation that happens in city government meetings, in county government meetings, in private nonprofit meetings of groups like House Everyone and the Way Home. And there's carried forward the Poverty and Homeless Board. This is your sentiment echoes everything we're hearing in other meetings. The deal is we have to get people to a place where they can be housed, where they can be legitimately situated, so that we can start throwing services at them. One caveat is that there are a lot of folks out there that we encounter who don't really like structure, and they're not really interested in rules. And so when we try to set something up like a rest stop or a supportive housing situation, they're not really interested in living within four walls. And I say that figuratively because there's a set of conditions expected when you're going to live in a community. Those are outliers.
Then that person needs to. Then that person needs to live out in the woods.
Well, okay, so there's a lot more of those folks than we realize, but I think the first step is getting more real estate and more structure for what you're talking about, so that we can at least get people into a place where we can wrap our arms around them and love them through their situation. And if they don't want to be loved, well, maybe we can address those behaviors a little more directly.
Thank you, Dallas.
But we're not there yet.
So I've got myself and then Amanda and then Ian. So on a personal soapbox note, I find it absolutely abhorrent that Walmart will pay poverty wages and then refuse to help people who are poor. I think it's an excellent example of why local business is so important to every community out there, and why these big box stores are a blight upon us. That being said, to move on to business and things we can actually affect through our work on the police commission, because all we're here to do is not solve homelessness overall, but to ensure that the police are not contributing to the problem. I know that on my walk-alongs and in my time working with Sergeant Julie Smith from downtown, she has done an excellent job as somebody who in some of that downtime, which our officers and leadership staff have so little of, she has done an excellent job of looking for places willing to house Conestoga huts and, and invite somebody in to, in my opinion, add to a place's security and to give somebody a sense of community and to give them the opportunity to build up from there. It's a little place here and there. It avoids the issue of a tent attracting more tents, and then falling into disrepair. And I also understand that she may be retiring soon. In one of my experiences as in the business world, I know that if we don't advertise something, if we don't tell people that something exists, and we don't sell it to them, then they're never going to take us up on that. So are there any efforts now to replace that role that Julie filled with free time? I'm hoping for something more permanent, where we have like a dedicated role of a background officer who's going to sell this idea to businesses around town. That might be
You've asked a huge question. I'm going to answer it a little simply. Julie's a rock star. I'm privileged that she works for me right now on days on my watch, and she's continuing to interact with the unhoused just now, not just downtown. So some of the things that she set in motion, such as community court and such as the Fuse team and some of the great infrastructure that we have with our municipal court and our social service partners, those exist and those will endure far beyond her leaving. We've hired Brenda Kostadar, for instance, to work in community court, and Brenda was part of the Whitebird organization, worked with Cahoots, worked with the court team, crisis outreach response team. So she knows intimately what the police side of things look like, as well as what the social service side. And Brenda's going to carry the torch moving forward for some of that stuff. As we train up our leadership cadre to replace those retiring, we're trying to instill in them the empathy and the excellence that Julie will be leaving behind.
Okay. Thank you. And for my last comment, I was hoping we could get an unfilled out rubric like we saw earlier that Jeremy was sharing, one that doesn't have names or.
Yeah, I'll get you a scoring matrix.
Excellent. Thank you.
Got it.
So I've got Amanda and then Ian on the.
Okay, thanks. I'm so sorry to hear that Sergeant Julie Smith is leaving because she's amazing. She's really great to work with.
She is.
I work in a social service agency. I work for HIV Alliance, and we work with a lot of homeless folks. And so I know how challenging this issue is. I think just one of the things I would point out is that there's been a big shift in the mental health system over the last few decades. And I think you see a lot more homeless folks now because folks are not institutionalized for their mental health, which in a lot of ways is fantastic, but it's really tough when I have clients who are naked in 40-degree weather and cannot take their mental health medication given where they are at in life. And I can't force them to get into care either. So, and the commitment process is very, very difficult. And one of the things that I know folks do is report these mental health episodes to Cahoots and to police with the hope that people will get arrested, because once they get arrested, then we can call the jail and ask them to do a psych eval, which then can hopefully get them into the hospital. But that's, to me, that just feels like such an awful system or a process. It's not a process that I want to do, but sometimes it's the process that's available to me. And I don't know, it's just awful. And it's an awful thing to work through with folks. But that wasn't my original point. My original point was, I had a question for Lieutenant Mozan. One of the other things we run into, to Counselor Zelenka's point about the citations, is that when I'm working with somebody who's been homeless and is ready to be housed, one of the first things landlords, if they're in a place where I can actually get them to work with a landlords look at their credit score and the things they have in collections. So if folks have these citations in collections, it makes it really difficult to get them housed. The funding sources that I get to help people get housed, I can pay for deposits or application fees or rent or whatever. I can't pay for things in collections. So I'm wondering if you could tell us about, I want to say there's a program to get some of those taken off for folks, but maybe you could remind us about that.
So St. Vincent de Paul has a program called Barrier Busters that does help with some of those issues. There is, unfortunately, there is a triage or a hierarchy on who gets the help first. And generally speaking, folks who are housed are top of the list because we don't want them to go out of housing and end up on the street. And then it filters down to those who are currently unhoused. I do know that the municipal court has, through community court, been very accommodating to those who are trying to get into housing, and they have assisted people in mitigating some of their situations. That's my best answer. I don't know how bad that problem is in terms of people who are being denied residency because of their prohibited camping tickets and collections.
Yeah, I mean, it's anything in collections. In my experience, you know, landlords are pretty excited to rent to the college students whose parents are paying their rent, and everybody else sort of anything they can, you know, any dings on any of my clients' records, they're out.
Well,
and
affordable
collect-
housing is something our community doesn't have enough of, and
Yeah.
it's something that since Mayor Baskin, we've been working our butts off to try to increase the numbers, and it's on a steady uptick. I know that.
Thank you both. So I've got Ian as the last, and then Bonnie, and then we're almost out of time. So we'll probably have one more after that if folks are chomping at the bit. Ian?
Hey, Lieutenant Mozan, nice to see you.
I
For those of you who don't know, I live at the corner of 5th and Almaden in the Whitaker. And so since I moved to the Whitaker about 2 years ago, I've been meeting more and more unhoused neighbors, and I've just been kind of overwhelmed by how much I didn't know. Two of my neighbors right now that are unhoused, one of whom is 8 months pregnant, and the other is a service-disabled Iraqi war veteran who did 2 tours. And yeah, the stories are really harrowing, like being there for them and also kind of maintaining my space is really difficult to do. Some of my unhoused neighbors are engaging in illegal behavior, which makes it harder for my 2 unhoused neighbors who are trying to get off the street. A couple of my neighbors don't feel safe. They have young kids. And it's really painful, and it's really difficult to understand how to be able to work in concert, particularly because folks who don't live in our community are coming to our community, whether it be Burrito Brigade doing food distribution, or folks who are doing cleanup and giving sharps boxes. So it's a dynamic that I certainly am not equipped to be able to contribute to in a meaningful way, but I'm trying to understand by talking to service providers and folks who are doing enforcement and unhoused people themselves to have a deeper feel for how lived experience should inform service provision and policy too, which is my question to you, because I'm part of the Homeless Resource Center steering committee, the advisory group that's designing the policy framework. And so we have a draft over to Peter, Reagan, and Jason. I think they're part of the homeless ops team. And so we're designing this policy framework, this designing outcomes, indicators, and outputs, really creating a logic model and a holistic system of care that's trauma informed. And I'm wondering when and if, is there a right time to engage with PD on that? I'm sure that since y'all are part of the same conversations that you'll be talking about it. But to me, I think there should be kind of like a holistic vision of what policy is, where you're not thinking of things in silos, but rather the Homeless Resource Center's policy framework should fit into a larger understanding of how it's informed by the TAC report, and how in turn the policy that we're working on around enforcement kind of stems at the very last, once we've tried to do prevention and wraparound service provision, because I love the idea of us contributing in a meaningful way to the policy like you talked about before, but I'm just worried a little bit about either me stepping on toes and bringing in people when there's kind of lanes to do work already, or kind of like a worst case scenario where we have these policies that aren't kind of talking to each other, and one isn't informing another.
So all of those names you brought up, Peter, Jason, Reagan, Brooke, all of the city manager staff that are in the homeless milieu are folks I meet with regularly. And they're part of the homeless operations team, the homeless policy group, and other groups that we're part of. I also meet with Lucy Zamorelli in the county's trauma-informed staff here and there, as well as HIV Alliance Harm Reduction Committee when I can get to those meetings. To put it simply, the pieces are moving together, and we're trying to complement one another. I think we're going to probably need to simplify our response a little bit, because there's going to be so much effort on the front end, so much diligence to try to help people be helped, that will hopefully only be brought in for those that won't be helped or that can't be helped. So I'm hoping we make some inroads, not only in finding people places to go, but also getting more meaningful boots on the ground to do the outreach work. And we haven't got very many folks out doing it right now. It's an overwhelming problem for those that do.
Thank you both. So I've got Bonnie, and then after that, we'll move on to the chief's report.
So I am sticking to the idea that this isn't a police problem and that you shouldn't be doing anything about it, and that the CDC says stay in place. We should just pick a spot and leave it that way. What I'm wondering is two things. One of them is how many sweeps have happened and how many are scheduled to happen? And also, is there any way to stop the citations? Because from the sound of what Amanda was saying, it sounds like by having citations, we are making it so that people are continuing to be homeless because they can't get a home because they have citations. So it just kind of, it's
Yeah, I
we should just be able to stop that, because if that's happening, then, and then she's not the first person that I've heard said that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I hear you. I'm not aware of, I don't think we've written very many prohibited camping citations in the last 6 months to a year. Since the pandemic, we've pretty much stopped our homeless camping citation response. On the other hand, we have issued a number of trespass citations, such as the one your friend didn't receive that in the park. She received it on the rail yards. The rail yards are private property. It's criminal trespass in the first degree to be up there, and they're currently trying to do construction work up there. So we've had sweeps in a sense that we've sent social workers through and noticed everyone that we would be coming. And then we had police officers go through and give people warnings, sometimes written warnings, that we would be through in a couple of days. And then we had more warnings. And then finally, we went through it with some enforcement action. And even then we wrote tickets and didn't take people to jail to try to get the message across that you can't be on the tracks. And so that message is pretty well out there. But there are a lot of people in the unhoused that are willing to sort of, roll the dice, because sometimes the cops don't show up because they get too busy dealing with actual police work somewhere. And that's just the way it goes, right? But in this case, the railroad is relying on us to ensure the safety of their workers and their ability to work unfettered and create their infrastructure that they're trying to create, and to do that without any campers in their private property. So that's ongoing. That's going to be happening for the next few weeks. As far as other sweeps, there will be closures of properties such as 5 and L Maiden and probably up on Ross Lane, or I'm sorry, on Lone Oak and Lone Oak Way. That one's already closed, but you can expect to see 5 and L Maiden, 5 and Fillmore close. And I'm hoping that it's not necessary for the cops to actually take an enforcement action, but they've been pretty slow going, some of them.
I'm sorry, my question was how many sweeps have happened and how many are scheduled to happen? So right now there's one scheduled, and then how many have happened previously? Sweeps?
So again, your definition of a sweep is a little nebulous. Sometimes a city worker, a person in public works shows up to post or clean, and it's called a sweep, So,
so what I mean is, like, when you have a bunch of campers and they are being told to leave the area, that's what I mean by a sweep.
For a closure of an area.
Okay.
I don't know. I honestly have no idea. We'd have to have crime analysis for that. I don't even think crime analysis would be the right tool for that. We'd have to do a little digging with Public Works perhaps to find out how many sites have closed where the police assisted them in closing.
Yeah, let's switch this a little bit, because this is where I jump in and get a little bit protective of the organization.
Thanks.
We do not initiate closures. Parks and Open Space initiates closures. Public Works initiates closures. Our stance and our posture right now is in support of those staff that are needing to close that for a variety of reasons. If there's a feeling of safety concerns, or if people are just obstinate and say they're not going to leave. But there's not anything. The last time I can remember us initiating a closure of space was out at the Y in front of the Coastal Farm as a result of finding $5,000 worth of stolen property in tents after it had happened there. So there's other people in this space that sometimes, we're the most recognizable ones when we're there because we're in uniform. And sometimes that happens is because we're so recognizable. The assumption is that somehow this is a police initiated closure of the property. But we've talked about this before. I've pulled us so far back that we're actually only really involved in a supporting role around safety and or somebody that's refusing to move. And we can get those numbers for you, Bonnie, because I know Parks and Open Space has those numbers, but I'm not sure we would be able to, without tapping into them, I'm not sure we would know how many times we've been involved in any kind of camp closures or moving people along.
Okay, yeah, because my concern, and actually one of the things that I was getting from some of the volunteers is that they're getting the feeling that it's like, it's not EPD that is doing this, that it's the city that's doing this. And I feel like what I'm getting from them is that that they say that we see that it's not the police that's doing this, and but it's creating a sense of lack of trust in the police, because at the end, the police is called in, you know, if you see like people are having like trouble leaving or not wanting to leave. So it's causing a lack of trust in the police, and just a sense of like a lack of respect for the police, because they're still part of it, but they understand, some of them understand that it's not the police, it's the city. And that's why I was saying, again, I don't think that it should be that the police shouldn't be involved at all. And I'm trying to make it, I don't know who is watching, but just like, tell the mayor of Roseburg said they can't do anything about this, about moving people around. So I'm just saying it shouldn't be on the police. So that's what I want to conclude with.
Well, and, you know, and I think in fairness to the city, you know, there's competing interests going on when we evaluate these camps. I mean, it's not uncommon in almost every case to have heard from the adjacent neighborhood and the neighbors that are absolutely completely fit to be tied with the behavior and the condition of that camp. And so you question and have to balance neighborhood livability with the removal of certain campers. And I'll also tell you, if you've not been out to some of these camps, we're talking about how unkind it is we're moving them. There's situations that by leaving them there in the conditions they're living in is equally as unkind. By moving them somewhere else, giving them a chance to clean up, and quite honestly, at the city's with the city resources, cleaning up stuff left behind allows at least for a fresh and more sanitary start for these camps but in almost every single case of any kind of camp closure or moving along of a camp, it is precipitated by an outpouring of complaints from either businesses or neighbors saying it's impacting our livelihood, it's impacting our sanitation and health, and it's impacting business. It's all of those things. So, you know, in the grand scheme of all of the camps that we have, and I want to hopefully we can put it in context. In the grand scheme of all the camps that we have, it relatively infrequently are we moving people along, and really it is at the behest of an overwhelming community outcry around what's going on in those camps.
Thank you. So from my perspective as chair, this also deals a lot with the community's trust of the police on both sides, whether they trust the police to protect the community, they trust the police because they're being constantly kicked out of a place. So this is not the last time this is going to come up. And that's good. Let's move on to the chief's report now.
Can I just ask one question? Because I heard something. I want to quick question.
Sure.
Who and what is, tell me a little bit about, because this is the first time I ever heard this term, the homeless operation team. Who is that?
I can answer that. So we have the section managers and division managers from the police, public works, library, recreation, cultural services, parks and open spaces, facilities, and city manager's office, fire department. We all get together as doers to talk about doers and managers to talk about what areas need attention, what impacts exist, and how we can help each other along. It's the best right now. This is the best status of communication across department silos I've ever seen in my 26 and a half years here.
And then my only question is, how many businesses are represented on that team? Business owners.
There are none, because this is an internal city team, but it's not a bad idea to have a collaboration with industry.
And I would also add churches and nonprofits. And I'm not saying everyone, but I'm saying a few.
Yeah, so the Poverty and Homeless Board of the county might be the best forum for that, because they actually address not just the county, the whole Lane County at large situation, but also the city of Eugene. And that's a much bigger room with a lot more stakeholders. And I would encourage you to contact that chair. That's Chris McAllister. He's with an organization called Carry It Forward. And he's a phenomenal guy. He's helped a number of people that I've connected him with.
For our work plan, we might consider asking Chris McAllister to come in and talk to us about EPD's role in some of this stuff. And that's something
Absolutely.
I can help arrange. He's a friend of mine.
Take down Sarai Johnson also. Sarai is the TAC report chair, or the TAC report lead for the city and county, and she has a foot in both camps.
And Reagan, watch us.
Thank you. All right, so right on time, let's move on to the Chiefs report.
Oh, goodness. How do you follow that? Maybe just in a way of just a couple of follow-up questions, because I wanted to yield to Doug, because he's so much working and the boots on the ground on this. Is from a policy perspective, Mr. Boggs, I think your comments are well taken around the number of individuals that need to be engaged from a leadership perspective, engaged in this dialogue. What I would say is, from my perspective, we do have an awful lot of people that are working on this, both in the city and the county. One of the disconnects that we've had, at least it's been in my limited experience being here, is that really mental health and homeless work is the work of the county, not the city. That's where that function, systemically, that's where that function lies. Now, having said that, the city has had to engage in this dialogue just because, and the solutions, because of our unique set of circumstances around the number of unsheltered adults that we have in the city of Eugene. And so that's why we have Reagan and Peter and a whole section of the city manager's office that's working on this, to include the homeless ops team and the homeless policy team, which includes me and all of my counterparts and peers. And so there's a lot of layers of this discussion. And then Sarai is that liaison that tries to bridge that gap between the city and the county, as the is continuing to figure out what to do. In my estimation, and people have heard me say this before, is that, there's several missing pieces of this puzzle that we're continuing to work on. The most challenging piece is the inventory piece of emergency shelter. I mean, undoubtedly that's, and low barrier emergency shelter. And I've said this openly from the moment I got here, is that if you want my boys and girls to tell people that they can't be where they're at, then we need to be able to tell them where they can be. And we continue to work on that. We're building that inventory.
I'm having trouble hearing you.
Sorry, that's my watch. We're building that inventory slowly but surely. But you're right, we have come up against tremendous amounts of resistance around location, and tremendous amounts of resistance around whether or not it's a ton of different microsites or kind of a big, more congregate shelter type of site. But the inventory is one of the missing pieces of this puzzle that we continue to work on and that we continue to advocate for, just to get people stabilized, because they can't make good decisions about moving up and out of homelessness, getting sober, or any of those things, or getting back on their meds until they get stabilized a little bit. And so that's what that's designed to do. But there's a lot of challenge in trying to find inventory for that, and we continue to try and be a good partner in trying to advocate for that wherever we can. I mean, to the extent that the police department a year and a half ago, we purchased 9 of those Conestoga huts. Those Conestoga huts that Julie Smith had populated were owned by the police department, because I had some year-end savings and we wanted to do something special in the downtown. And we bought 9 Conestoga huts so that we could shelter some of these individuals that were willing to be case managed. Unfortunately, we just have a lot of people that aren't willing to have any kind of case management assigned to them, and just want to do what it is they want to do. And so that's a different problem to solve as we move down this path. So just a couple comments about that after your guys' really good conversation. And as always, I'm looking and trying to move EPD away from things that I don't think that police officers should be as involved in, at least as a first touch. We may eventually have to come back into something if it ends up getting dangerous or unsafe or criminal in nature, but trying to be mindful as a first touch of what we're supposed to be responsible. And, you know, Cahoots is a good example of that type of resource that's been with us for a long time, where we try to let that be the first touch instead of a sworn police officer. So we're continuing to work on that. So in the way of update, that's a good segue into kind of what the world has been like for your chief of police, which has been concurrently budget, ad hoc committee, state legislation that's happening that I'm testifying at, and community safety initiative workshops. All four of those things are happening all at the same time. They consume almost all of my time, week in and week out, with a variety of meetings, and trying to pay attention to that. We are looking downstream at the ad hoc committee, having a report by the end of March for council to consider. I think that there has been many comments made about the importance of the police commission having a role in that as we kind of land that plane. I think this body does a nice job, and even with the newest additions to our police commission, are starting to settle in nicely with understanding the framework around building policy, what good policy looks like, and what policy is actually achievable and attainable, and that we can hold people accountable for. And so that would be, I think, a good place for that to be. The budget's going to be a challenge for us. We're faced with about a $4.5 million deficit in the general fund right now. Your police department is the largest general fund budget in the city, and that's not unusual. That's usually every city's police department is their largest general fund budget. And so we're looking at strategies to cut just shy of $2 million out of my budget and still provide services. So the pandemic has been challenging for all of us for a variety of reasons, and the city isn't off the hook on that. And so we're working on that. One of the hopeful things that, I mean, there's a lot of hopeful things, but one of the hopeful things around budget and around doing things differently is the ability to take a look at the community safety initiative and the revenue that we would see through the collection of that payroll tax, and how we are going to address all things community safety. And that's not just police department, that's how do we address prevention so that police don't even have to show up? How do we address homelessness? How do we address court system that is woefully overworked and is in desperate need of, in my opinion, kind of a restorative justice overhaul or an enhancement around a restorative justice and opportunities around restorative justice, because we don't have a jail system, nor we don't want to jail people. And even if we did, we didn't have the space anyway. So it works out just fine to look for alternatives or diversions for people other than jail, and to include our fire partners and their kind of response to these low acuity calls that are just by the thousands every year with people that are struggling out on the streets. And so I think there's some opportunity to do something different and creative. There's not probably about every week I'm talking about what we're doing here in Eugene to somewhere other than the country, else in the country, to include Canada, whether it's our auditor system, whether it's our CRB that's attached to the auditor system, this police commission, or Cahoots, or informing around our body cam system that we have had in place for 5-6 years. It's very robust. There's always somebody that's leaning on us to try and help inform their decision making as they go. And you've heard me say this before, and I stole this from one of my officers, is that other people's goal weight is our starting weight. I mean, we're so far ahead of most police departments and along the reform path and journey that it's really evident by how much we get contacted about wanting to know what it is we're doing and how we got to where we're at. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean we're complacent and that we're resting on our laurels. We're looking at how we can improve what we have, both in the auditor's office, the CRB, improving what we have in the police department around hiring and training, use of force, those types of things. And so we're looking forward to leaning in on some of those that we can pick off. And there's going to be some that we can actually do fairly quickly. I think that are some low-hanging fruit that make a lot of sense. And there's going to be some that are going to take a period of change, because many of suggestions may come down to either changing state statute or having legislative initiative, and or having to bargain exchange with our police unions, and that oftentimes will take some time to be able to do that. And so we'll have varying degrees of implementation, short, medium, and long-term implementation strategies as we get better informed by the ad hoc committee and ultimately through council, through that council report. So we're settled and prepared to lean in heavy on this, and it's going to be, it's a marathon. It's certainly not a sprint when it comes to these things, but I think we're in pretty good shape to embrace that change, and we've tried to be involved to the best of our ability. Usually we're brought in as subject matter experts to just talk about kind of baseline information before they make recommendations. And so we, as always, will continue to always be available to whatever group needs to have that discussion, and we're continuing to have staff be prepared at moment's notice to be able to provide that information. So that's what's going on in my world. I don't see that changing. It may be the exact same chief's report you get next time we're together, because it's not something that just comes and goes in a matter of a few weeks. It's something that we're involved in the long haul. So
excellent, thank you. So I've got time for one or two questions. I know I have one quick one, but does anybody else have? All right, so my quick one, especially now that Naivasha has been able to join us, with the, I know you spoke to us last month and to City Council about Eugene any officers involved in the riots and insurrection at the Capitol. I was just double checking if any more stuff had come to light, and if if we've asked officers, and if the union is as committed as the rest of the city to making sure we don't have white supremacists in the force.
Yeah, we don't have any information to suggest anybody went to Washington, D.C. at that time. I mean, one of the analysis that we actually had a public records request to list every officer that had taken time off during that situation. And that's, it happened on the 6th. That's a normal set of days off for some officers. From other officers, that's their day on. We probably fulfilled that request. I don't know the outcome of whether or not they took time off. I'm monitoring and continue to monitor not only through the background when we hire officers, but periodically as we go through, as we're made aware of whether it's social media posts or communications, is trying to legislate the best we can, both obviously on-duty conduct, but off-duty conduct as well. But have not undertaken an endeavor to identify every officer that took time off or that were on days off and interview every officer and ask them to account for their time while they were away. That has not happened. I don't believe that's necessary. We've had no indications, and trust me, in a police department, it's telephone top, right? I mean, they can't keep a secret anyway. So we'd know if there's something to chase down John, but we are paying attention to that. It'd be horrible if we had to address something like that, but I don't see anything that indicates that we're involved in any way.
It would be extremely embarrassing, to say the least, if the public information request were to divulge something that we had not seen. So thank you for being on top of that. So I see Ian's hand, and then we'll be out of time. Oh, Bonnie, we can do one more. It'll cut into our time later, though. Ian?
Thanks for the update, Chief. I just have a quick question about vaccine uptake. The Whitaker Community Council is doing work with Oregon Health Authority through their COVID-19 grant for community-based organizations. You might see some of our bus ads running around the community with Whitaker community members, folks from our unhoused community, business owners, families, children, and we're communicating a campaign called All for One, One for All, the 4 things you can do to keep the ones at most risk safe. And this is based on the idea that if we have community members that represent those who we're trying to serve, that will be the best message to those who are disproportionately impacted, that we should be listening to one another to help one another. And we're pivoting now to our vaccine communication, and we're doing it in 3 ways, one of which is projecting vaccine confidence. And my question to you is, are you seeing a significant uptick in the folks who didn't initially get access to the vaccine because they were in group 1A. I just want to make sure that we have, vaccine confidence. I know that for a number of reasons, it can be a difficult decision for some folks, but I just know that because we don't have firm numbers on what herd immunity looks like, it may be something that's effective for your officers, for those of you who were vaccine confident, to have conversations. I know you just said how it's kind of like telephone, and I'm sure these conversations happen a lot, but I just want to make sure that folks who have access to the vaccine do get that access and get that confidence, because we don't know what herd immunity, our percentage looks like.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And, I certainly have gotten my vaccine, and I'll tell you the story about getting a second dose and how that went. That wasn't fun, but certainly worth it. One of the delicate balances that I have, especially within my organization, is the fact that it's a paramilitary organization and I'm the chief of police. And generally speaking, I have to be careful about what I suggest, because then it feels an awful lot like an order. And so I'm really careful about the way and how artful I communicate my confidence in the vaccine, the fact that I've chosen to go get the vaccine, but being careful not to leave somebody with the impression that that's a mandate, because I think that's a personal choice. And so, around vaccine confidence, I have been openly talked about my experience, openly talked about how important it was to me, openly talked about and made it very, very easy for our staff to get their vaccines. And the Eugene Springfield Fire Department down at 2nd and Chambers has done a fantastic job of vaccinating people. I mean, it's just a well-oiled machine. But I'm also very careful, Ian, about the things that come out of my mouth have a tremendous amount of impact. And that can be good, but it also can feel a little bit directive from time to time. And I don't want to be that when such a difficult personal choice.
And I will kind of piggyback off that a little bit, sir. Just from the line level, I know like our union app, I push out updates on when those vaccines have been available for folks. So our membership actually gets a push notification that gets sent to them to say, hey, there's vaccinations, first round, second round today. Go and get it done if you so choose. And the times that I actually went and got my vaccine, I saw folks there that I just didn't think would be there based on prior conversations. So it was nice to see them kind of chime in and actually be there and get their vaccines.
So Navasha, you had your second vaccine. Did you have any outcome, any side effects?
Yes, sir. I was pretty sick the next day.
Yeah, and so that's one of the challenges that we have, is when we're trying to staff healthy and keep staff operational, is having to be really, really careful about how we orchestrate this. Otherwise, you got half your police officers all taking a sick day if we all send them at once. So it's a really delicate balance. And again, Eugene Springfield Fire has just been fantastic and done a great job of getting people vaccinated.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thank you. Bonnie, do you mind if we swing back around if we have time later for your question?
That's fine.
Thank you. Awesome. So let's move on to the field force policy. I know this is going to be really big policy. There's lots of stuff going on here. Thank you, Chief, for your report. And to launch us off, do you want to talk us through some of the big changes? Sergeant Nelson, you're still muted, by the way.
Yeah, I just unmuted. I certainly can. I don't feel like there were a lot of big changes. It needed to be updated. Obviously, it's a 2001 policy, so there were a lot of things that needed to be changed in it. Obviously, the format piece was one, and then just kind of putting it in line with, I talked with our field force specialist and the captain, and just kind of putting it in line with what our practice is, was kind of the biggest portion of it. Added that, normally field force would be activated by a watch commander, which is typically what we're doing. And it's, that could potentially be a sergeant if there's no lieutenant working, if they are designated to be the watch commander, but that's kind of the direction we want things to start moving to. And then again, like I said, just more updating type stuff. The other piece that was important to make sure I got was keeping it in line with the Senate bill that passed related to or that was signed related to the use of CS gas. And so I changed some of that language in there and conferred with city attorney on that, and he was pleased with the way that looked. And other than that, like I say, it just there wasn't a whole major amount of changes on it as you scroll through it.
Can I interject something real quick? And brought up a really interesting point as you guys go down this path and other paths, is that there is an outside chance, and I can flag some of these for you guys. There's an outside chance that you'll engage in an endeavor around this policy and others, only to be having this conversation again after state legislature changes something or the ad hoc committee proposes something to council that we want to take on. That's the risk we run when we talk about trying to land on good policy around some of these more controversial issues, is that most, if not all of these, are squarely within the state legislators' crosshairs. We're tracking over 300 bills related to policing right now, and I've testified a half a dozen times so far. And it's a long session all the way till June. Some of these won't make it through committee, but many of them will make it. And so we just need to be prepared that we're gonna have this now and potentially need to amend all of these policies to reflect either state law and or anything the ad hoc committee wants to see addressed.
Sean, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very important point. Thank you very much, Chief Skinner. With that, let's go through it sort of section by section to break down where we might have questions. So starting out, let's start with 318.1. Does anybody have questions with any of those, 4 sub points going forward? I know I have one. So let's start with Ian and then myself.
I just had a quick question about identifying information. I tried to go through other policies today and see if there were parallel policies that talk about identifiable information, but I couldn't find other policies that states what identifiable information is. So shame on me for not reaching out to Jeremy beforehand, but I just wanted to see if there was any extant policy that talks about identifying information that's visible in the policy. It's 318.1 for talking about name or badge number. So I just wanted to see if we could have, for the sake of consistency, the same language as other policies when it talks about identifiable information.
So this would probably be in our equipment section, I imagine, where we talk about, or officer presentation of some sort. I am also not 100% aware. Ryan, you're muted, but do you know if that's standard practice laid out anywhere in any other policy?
I'm not aware of that. Well, I mean, it would be in uniforms, yeah, because I mean,
Uniforms.
we have a name and badge number and all that on there. I don't know if it speaks specifically about this policy and refers to it, but yeah, I mean, we have it in our uniform policy for sure. You have to be identified by name and badge number.
So the reason it would also be included here is just because of the additional gear folks tend to wear.
So what happens a lot of time is they have protective gear that they're putting over the top of their uniform. And so a lot of times that will cover up their nameplate or their badge number. And so we want to make sure that they're identifiable. There's a large placard on the back of what we call turtle gear. So it's kind of like it'd be like a protective vest like you wear as a catcher or something along those lines. So if you took any projectiles or anything, it would help protect you. And so on the back, there's a large patch on the back that's Velcroed on that has a name. The helmets are important for us too, because people can't see the faces and that kind of stuff. And so you got another badge number on the back of the helmets. And I contacted our uniform person prior to looking at this policy, just ensure that all that stuff was still happening. So all the gear that she issues has all of that on it.
Excellent. Thank you. So my question is, when it says any a field force will normally be, where was it? My question might be for the next section, actually. When we talk about the people who are any combination of sworn personnel can make up a field force team in section 1. I would like that to exclude canine units. I think it makes sense that we don't have dogs in any of these. I think that's mentioned in the canine policy, but just doubling it up here makes
Did we
sense.
talk specifically about that in the canine policy? Is that what you're referring to, Sean?
I believe in the canine policy we have that it will not be canines will not be used in large scale incidents.
I think that was crowd control, if I remember correctly, but I
Yeah,
don't have that in front of me. Yeah.
Crowd control, exactly. So just having that same idea reiterated here, I think would be important.
Okay. All right. I don't see that would be a major issue unless you do, Chief.
Excellent.
Wrong tool for that application, and that's why we have it.
Yeah, I figured.
Elsewhere, yeah.
All right, so I see. Sorry, I almost missed you, Bonnie. I see Bonnie's hand.
I just have a question. So I'm looking at a video from back 6 months ago, and I'm not seeing that it's consistent that all the officers have the large patch that you're saying that identifies them. So I'm wondering, like, because I see some of them have a patch and some of them don't, so it's kind of inconsistent in the response that was given for one of the riots or protests or whatever. So I'm just kind of wondering, why is it inconsistent?
So I don't know the video, but I mean, not every officer is going to wear the same gear. So if they're not wearing gear that covers up their name and badge number in the front, then you wouldn't necessarily see that patch in the back. So some choose not to wear what I call that turtle gear. So you wouldn't necessarily see that. But if they have the turtle gear, that patch should be affixed to the back of it, as well as all the helmets have sticky little numbers on the back with their badge numbers on it.
I think that goes to another important point here of who's checking upon deployment that name and badge and identification are visible.
Right. Yeah. And then also, I think it also brings up another point, sort of like an accessibility point, where in general, whether or not they're wearing the turtle gear, I think that it should be easily identifiable. So I don't necessarily, I'm not saying that it should be the names that are being given out to people, but a number that identifies them, regardless of the situation. And I think, for example, I mean, we've got people that are old, that don't have, very good eyes, or that are just maybe albino and they have astigmatism or whatever that makes it so they can't see very well. I think that it should be something that is, I think this is a conversation for another time, but I really think that numbers should be big so that they can be easily identifiable in any situation. That's all.
So when we talk about numbers, are we talking about, Bonnie, are you referring to badge numbers when you say numbers?
I imagine yes. Badge numbers, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to get and Ryan will be able to speak to this, badge numbers are one of those things that means something different to every agency. Badge numbers get recycled all the time. Not the same officer has the same badge number for promoted or if they get moved. The only number, so my badge number is number 1, but the next chief that comes in, his badge number will be number 1. But when I got here, my badge number was like 572. It made no sense. It's a piece of equipment that we have to recycle. And so as people leave and new people come in, we do that. And so keeping kind of an updated list of whose badge number is what. One of the better identifiers, but it makes it a little bit more difficult, is our DPSST number, which is our certification number that stays with the officer the lifetime of the officer. And we know exactly who's assigned to that DPSST number. Now it's a bigger number. That's the challenge. It's usually a 5-digit number. In my case, it's 5-digit. It might be 6 digits in other people's cases. But when we talk about badge numbers, so much of the badge number discussion is more deeply rooted in kind of Hollywood and media, name, rank, and badge number. And badge numbers don't mean that much. quite honestly, to most police officers these days, just because they move around. Now, some may have had the same number for a lot of years, but I know many have changed badges and it doesn't mean as much. So when we think about identifiers, I want to make sure we get something where we can have somebody throw out a number and we can actually access a database very quickly to see who that person is.
Excellent. So I've got Lindsay and then myself on the queue.
So another thing, Bonnie, depending on what night you're looking at, there were also people called in from other agencies. So you're going to see some inconsistencies in uniforms in general, depending on what night you're looking at. I don't know exactly where to talk about uniforms. And so since we're kind of talking about, I'm just going to throw this out there. I really dislike military looking uniforms. What I mean is like things that look like camo, things that don't look like police. I don't like them. And that was one of the things that I noticed in the videos that we watched. I don't know if those were from EPD or if those were from Springfield or other agencies, but they trigger me in a different kind of way, particularly in a high intensity situation, like a situation where you would have a field force thing going on. I really don't like them. So I would like to be able to distinguish a civilian, public safety, law enforcement very visually clearly from any kind of military body. And I agree with Bonnie's point about it's important that people be easily identifiable and that we figure out ways to do that regardless of, you know, the gear. So thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, for my issue or question is also based on what Bonnie was saying, that upon deployment, if possible, you know, when we are doing those hand signs and lining up, some quality control to ensure that everything is easily visible would be very much appreciated in the policy to make standard practice. I know there are some instances where there's something on fire right now, we have to go, where that might not be as, that might, you know, conflict with real world needs. So maybe not something strict of we must, but when possible, we should, you know, because I know a lot of these things are set up in preparation rather than in the moment. Yeah, go ahead, Bonnie.
And just to kind of go off of what Lindsay was saying, kind of to protect the views of EPD and how EPD is presented, if we did have other agencies that were helping, which Lindsay was saying they were, it's kind of hard to tell who is who. So I think it would be really great to have EPD definitely be very easily identifiable. And just like EPD wasn't the one that beat that person, that might have been the other people. So just, yeah, I think that that's a good thing to keep, you know, the vision of EPD being up.
Put that on the list of things to discuss for our work plan coming up, because I think that might be a different policy. Let's move on. Does anybody have any questions on 318.2 going forward? Seems pretty straightforward to me. Next section, 318.3. This is talking about the formations. I had some concerns about a wedge formation, just some questions about when we would need to advance on a crowd. It sounded like that was kind of out of vogue for operational decisions.
Sorry, Sean, I didn't catch all of what you said there. I apologize.
So in section 318.3, the wedge formation is used to advance against a crowd. You know, it reminds me of military style tactics of, you know, driving into the heart of this. It sounded like that was kind of out of vogue for most situations, unless there was like an immediate threat to life going on in a crowd where you needed to extract somebody.
And a lot of times that you're absolutely right. A lot of times that is what's going to happen is there's an emergency. There's a reason why we have to get that moved immediately. Maybe we've got, emergency equipment coming through, or we've got somebody who's down in the crowd and we need to push that crowd back. That's a way that we can make a formation and be able to do that.
Excellent. So I was concerned specifically about using the vehicle as a point. So is that mean like the vehicle's at the front driving into a crowd?
Well, I mean, I can see how you would look at it that way. No, but operationally, that's not how it works. So using the vehicle as a point like that, it gives us an opportunity to use it as a rescue. If we have people that are down, we can put people in it. It's much easier to put them into the car than it would be to try to carry them off. It also carries extra equipment. And again, like I said in the policy there, the nice thing is we're getting it all on videotape as well. So if we are moving like that, it's recorded. So if people want to look at it at a later time, they're able to do that. It's not, I can see where could seem like we're coming in at 10, 15 miles an hour, but that's not how that works. Most of the time with field force applications, it's very slow and methodical. It's not a rush forward or anything like that. So it's a slow push forward to move a group away from someplace, or to rescue somebody, or to get some sort of an emergency that might have happened dealt with.
Lindsay, I see your hand up.
Just on the vehicle issue, the other thing that seemed really important from watching the videos was that when officers have gas masks on, people can't hear their commands very well, or from very far away. It was super obvious. Even people kind of close to officers were repeating things couldn't hear what they were saying. And so the vehicles with the loudspeakers close by was really the only viable way to communicate, more than 10 feet away from people, which you don't really want to be that close to people if you don't have to be. So anyway, that was just another observation, like things I don't think about because I never wear a gas mask. People can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. And the vehicle is very, very helpful for that. So we can get a loud voice conveyed a long distance. So thank you.
Excellent. Ian?
Yeah, my question's about the line formation. I didn't understand what a display of force meant. And I was just wondering if de-escalation was an option if you're at the point of creating a formation. To me, it seemed like it'd be pretty difficult to de-escalate if you were displaying force. But again, I didn't really understand what the phrase display of force meant in this context.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, de-escalation would come into play way before the field force portion even started. And then there would, obviously, if there were opportunities to de-escalate within the field force, we would take advantage of those as well. But we're basically, if we've got something that we need to hold or protect, or we've got some concerns and we want to show people that they can't move forward any further than they are right now, that's where you would put that line up. The terminology, I understand what you're talking about there, but the de-escalation is something that's required for every officer, every situation before we even get to that point. And then any opportunity within that time frame, we would do the same thing. But this would be for a particular situation, particular incident where we needed to show that this is where we're going to stop and we can't go any further for whatever reason it might be. But it would be a safety reason for the most part.
Bonnie and then Jennifer.
I'm just wondering, what, if anything, is being lost when it says, or is relatively safe location for video personnel? So like no longer will you be using video personnel, you're using a static camera that's located within the car. So I don't know where the audio is coming in through there. So I'm just wondering what's being lost when you no longer have video personnel?
So a long time back, we used to just video these, all of them, from start to finish. And there's some legal issues around that has been vetted through the city attorney. And so that's why I referred to the video policy. So, I mean, we can't start video and just video the assembly from start to finish. So the parameters there have to come from, a crime has to take place before we start videoing. I know Chief talked about that, I think the last meeting, where we can't put drones up until something like that happens. So we can't start videoing that incident until we have these certain parameters in place. And so that's why we don't do that any longer.
Oh, but you can with the in-car camera.
The body worn video and in-car camera can capture what we're doing. Yes, we can't go out and just videotape the crowd. It's the perspective of the officer who's on scene through the body worn and the car camera.
Okay, and so sorry, so I read a bunch of other things. I didn't get to the technology camera portion of it, but essentially that one will clarify like when people will, like personnel will actually be recording the
I'm not sure if I follow what you're asking. Sorry, Bonnie.
never mind. I'll
Okay. Excellent. So looking at through formations, communications, does anybody have any questions on 318.4? Excellent. Are these industry standard, used in multiple departments, or are they kind of unique to us?
So the formations are pretty standard. The commands and stuff like that can change, and that's one of the things too that we're probably going to run into. I know Chief said earlier there's legislative stuff, there's all sorts of things going on where we may have to look at this again and make some alignments to it. In speaking with Lieutenant Salisbury, we're looking at potentially changing some of our commands so that they're consistent with like other agencies. If we do have a large scale event where other agencies have to come in and help with something like this, I know our goal always is to handle our field force with our officers, and if we need to bring people in, we'll bring them in to handle calls for service within the city, because we want to handle our stuff on our own. So I mean, you never know, you always want to be prepared if something big were to happen, but we would like to be consistent with all the commands. So if we raise a fist in the air and it means one thing to us, but it means something to somebody else, it can get confusing, and that's not where you want to have confusion when something like's happening. So yeah. I anticipate that these will change, but I don't have a timeline on that.
No worries. That sounds excellent. That addresses one of my concerns. Jennifer?
Yeah, sorry to bring this back a little. The more I've been thinking about what Ian brought up, I want to just go back to that in a minute, because the thing I liked about 3.8.3 formations was that it was very specific about what each formation does and why you would use it. But when he mentioned that one kind of doesn't, because a display of force to me means showing you who's the boss, but that's not what you do it for. You're doing it for a very specific reason, which is this is where we're stopping. We're not going past this point, and we're serious about it. And I don't know how to word that, but I think that's something to consider changing to, because all the rest of them are very specific about why you're using it, and that one's a little vague. I don't know. That's just my thought.
Yeah, there's a perfect word that I can't think of right now for what that is. Ryan, do you have any?
Yeah.
Line in the sand.
What was that? I didn't hear.
Line in the sand.
Line in the sand. Yeah, let me think on that a little bit. I
to establish like an operational area for the police as well, right? Like we saw that at the recent Trump rally, was what I saw as a line formation of folks in the intersection, establishing an area where the police could operate.
Yeah, and it could be for that, but this
not
exclusive. I don't want to tie it into something that specific, because it could be used for other purposes as well. That's why I'm trying to think of some verbiage for that.
Deterrence, some around deterrence.
Is the display of force the piece that's most disturbing for folks? Is that where we're at with that? Just so I know.
Yeah.
Well, because display of force to means you're just like trying to show that you're the big dog, right? Not rather than like solving some kind of problem or creating some sort of like intentional situation. I don't know. It's just the wording is weird.
Okay. Let me put some thought into that. I may have to come back with you on that one, but let me put some thought on it. I might want to reach out to some of the other folks to have a discussion with them. I don't want to put something in there that isn't going to work, or we'll find a situation where we're like, oh shoot, we can't do this that way because we put this wording in. Chief, do you have something?
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the interesting things about crowd dynamics and what we've seen is, keep in mind, the vast majority of the people that are gathering are there peacefully, lawfully, and don't want any trouble. They're not there to cause any trouble. And what happens is, when we do certain things, is it communicates in a really unintrusive way communicates that maybe it's starting to get a little bit out of control. And what we've seen is many of those same people pick up on those cues and say, okay, this isn't me. I don't want to have a part of this. And then we see a smaller group of individuals that won't matter what we do or what show of force we have, they're looking for a fight anyway. And so it's kind of that delicate balance of how it's almost like a dance, almost like a nonverbal communication that we have with people. And it was part of my testimony around the unlawful assembly thing, is that we have so many people that are there lawfully that when the minute they get the notion that potentially it's starting to bleed over into unlawful activity, they don't want to have anything to do with that. And they disperse themselves and they really handle it very, very nicely. And we don't ever have to have an issue with them. So when we're having this conversation, it's just interesting to think about the type of crowd as a whole that we're dealing with and the way we're trying to communicate with the crowd through nonverbal cues, knowing that the vast majority of them are going to take us up on it and disperse or move aside or kind of adhere. And then we're left with kind of that smaller group that helps us be a little bit more focused in the event that enforcement action has to be taken.
Used to deter escalation might be a phrasing to consider. But for now, let's jump on to the next thing as we move forward. Thank you, Jennifer. Section 318.5, the chemical agents and OC. I know this is the one that's in the crosshairs most dramatically at the legislature right now as well. I imagine they will duplicate some of my suggestions, but this is also an opportunity for us to get ahead of the ball a little bit. Does anybody have any questions going for these? Is that handout?
Might want to spell out OC and CS.
Okay.
Ian, and then myself.
I have a proposed language change. So at the very beginning of the policy, it states this policy is intended to be used in conjunction with other relevant policies, and then it lists them. But it also references 1202 audio video recordings and 1203 body worn video. So I thought we might add language in the beginning to include those two policies. And so
that's a good catch. You bet. I didn't put those up there. You bet.
Yeah, so I just put it in the chat. If you want to grab that language, I might have missed something though. So I just threw it in there for you, Sergeant Nelson.
Perfect, thank you.
So I had, Lindsay, was that your comment as well? Okay. For my comment, 318.5, never mind. I lost my thought. Not seeing any other comments right now. Bonnie, excellent. You're muted still.
Thank you. I'm thinking that it would be nice to add, and tell me if you don't think that this is appropriate, but under E, sorry, you guys are using a different number, 318.5, number 4A, where it says, consider factors such as the size of the crowd, environment, houses, hospitals. I would just want to add tents just in case, because we seem to have a lot of tents around. So just add that just in case. I don't think it's a pretty big thing. I think it would be okay.
Yeah, that is actually the same section that I had concerns with, where consideration is important. I don't feel like that language is strong enough. You can consider something and then ignore it, choose to ignore it. I think there should be some guidance of, CS gas should not be used unless necessary near hospitals, something along those lines. I suspect that's the same direction that a lot of the legislature is going to go, because I know that was a huge source of complaints both here and in Portland about people at home getting gassed because they were nearby.
Sure, we were the nights we did have the gas deployments that were happening down on our campus. It was discussed significantly numerous times at the actual incident not to deploy gas anywhere near the hospitals, and it was very deliberately done that the crowd moved quite significantly away from the hospitals to make sure that that didn't happen. So practically, from a practicality purpose, we are very cognizant of that. So
yeah, excellent. Then it should be easy to write it into the policy as well without making it too encumbered, I hope.
Yeah, and I just want to be careful to say that never say never, because there's in our work there's always potentially a reason to do something. I mean, if we're in a position where we're going to literally save someone's life, then we still want to give them the opportunity to do that, depending upon the situation. So I think we can craft something there, though.
Yeah, unless there's no other option, or whenever possible type stuff. I saw V, your hand.
Yeah, Sergeant Nelson, my question is a bit mundane, I think. When I was trying to prepare for this meeting and was trying to look up field force, I did not find any examples or anything like that online. I found other, unrelated. It was, one was the definition for physics, and then one was for technology. And I did find mobile field force. I think that's what other departments use, right? Am I correct? Or
So
this is traditionally the term used for this kind of policy? Is it?
Yeah, it's traditionally over agencies. I mean, they can call their field force teams certain things, like OSP calls them their MERT team. Don't ask me the acronym, I forgot already. But it's called field force is what it is. Yeah, so that's a very widely used term across agencies all across the area.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chantel, and then Alan.
I just have a small question too on the considering the factors. This might be small too, but how about like if children are around or people with disabilities in the crowd? I don't know if that's language that should be included there, but I feel like that would make a big difference on whether you're using spray or not.
Adding children to the list. I think it might be a little bit harder to tell who is disabled in certain ways, but
yeah, we certainly could add in some more stuff like that. I want to be careful about how much we add in there, because I mean, we could really get into I don't know if language of, I don't know. I will look at that. I think there's some additional stuff we can put in there that would be totally fine. I just don't want to get it to like an exhaustive list, I guess.
Prevalence of vulnerable individuals might be a good catch-all. Alan, and then Bonnie, and then V.
When we were looking at 808, we actually pulled out the tear gas section of that last time because we said we're going to have a separate policy on use of tear gas.
Yes.
Should that separate policy be referred to here? And should we?
I absolutely would say yes if we had it, but that policy has not been written yet, so
doesn't exist yet.
Yeah, so I'm 100% with you, and when I was looking at it, I was like, man, it'd be nice to plug that in there, but we don't have that policy written yet. It's definitely up on the list, but it's not done yet.
And I imagine this conversation is going to go pretty heavily into shaping that policy.
Yeah.
So I've got Bonnie, and then V. Oh,
Is
sorry.
there a way to like put a folder in there and say and any use of tear gas policy?
Well, I think probably the easier way to do this, and again,
we're going to create.
I'm really new here, so I'm not sure if this is the right way to do it, but I think the easiest way to do this would be once that policy was created, then we could tie it to all the related policies. And we've done that before, like we've added that when we removed the carotid, we just went back into the policy and said the carotid had been removed, and we could do something like that. Because that's going to be something that is going to be high on my list to get done. So it's not like it's going to be something that's going to be sitting for a long time. So.
Yeah, I would suggest waiting to the end of the legislature, but yeah.
Yeah.
Bonnie, and then V.
Kind of going off of what Chantel was saying. So under, was it E and 4C, consider moving the line forward upon deploying gas, moving quickly but in an organized manner to help disperse the crowd. So I was thinking, what if it would, like, it had an additional thing that said, but in an organized, possibly non-aggressive manner that considers the crowd's mobility, because there are people like angry grannies and children and petite people. So
We
like
don't
not
think-
pushing people.
What's that?
So like not pushing people, if that makes sense. Like, I mean, I understand like not pushing them to the ground, but you know, doing that little push that you all do.
Yeah, usually how that works is, I mean, they're typically moving when that CS gas comes out. I mean, it's not something that people usually stick around for very long,
Yeah,
unless
you're
we
right.
have gas masks. So we're moving forward as they're moving forward, and just kind of making up that ground between them until they get dispersed out of the area.
Okay, never mind. Thank you.
V?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, I think Chantel, you brought up the question about what if there are kids in the crowd and the field force was deployed. I would think that would run into a risk. I don't know what you were implying to, you know, but maybe if there are kids in the crowd, then we don't use, you know, certain chemical agents. But the risk is that then if you have a riotous crowd, all they got to do is bring one kid, right? And then the police have to really not do anything about it. So that's the danger of, you know, doing that. And I would put it on the parents. What are you doing bringing a kid to a riot, to a protest? You know, what are they doing there? You know, why aren't they at home studying? Why aren't they, you know, in a safe place? That would be my question, you know, to have something in place as far as a policy that says when there's kids involved in the protest or a riot, then you no longer can use, you know, these instruments to control the crowd. I think that runs into a huge, you know, it's opening up a can of worm, you know, because all you got to do is just bring a kid, and then that pretty much puts the end to, you know, law enforcement being involved and be able to effectively control the crowd. Anyway,
Thanks, V.
My
I don't think any of our discussions have been that prescriptive, but Chantel, did I see your hand?
Yeah. I was just gonna say, I think it should just be a consideration when they're going to use the spray. Not that it has to deter them from using it, but definitely if you see a lot of kids around, like my own kid has been at protests. And sometimes, you know, it turns ugly, or we just saw, you know, the girl in the back of the police car get maced. Like there's situations where being a child needs to be considered, even if you say, okay, yes, the situation, we have to use this spray. Okay, but at least it was a consideration going into it and they were taken into account is kind of what I'm trying to say.
Excellent. So Jennifer, did I see your hand up or did you? Okay, let's jump to the next section. Let's just consider 318.6. I don't see anything of note myself, and we can always jump back. Bonnie, we're almost out of time though. You're muted.
Okay, so where it says, I just want some clarification. So arrest rescue team, this team generally stationed near the Grenadiers and near the field force commander or executive supervisor is tasked with making arrests and rescuing down officers. Okay, what's a grenadier? Because I looked it up and I don't think we have grenadiers, but.
So that's who we call employees who are carrying, there's a vest that has a lot of gas canisters in it, and that's where we deploy the gas canisters. So we call a grenadier someone who's throwing the gas canisters.
Can we change that name? Because that's, I know that sounds weird, but it just, grenadier is a military term for people that have actual grenades. And I think that if anybody were to, if any person that's a busybody would be reading this, they would be like, oh, EPD can throw grenades at us, and that's what it means. And if you look it up on Wikipedia or in the dictionary, it says they have grenades and they can launch grenades.
We'll change the name.
A different term.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are one of the perfect examples of why we do things like this, because I can promise you that this is legacy language that's been around forever, that we get caught up in, that we don't get to look at. Kind of like your gender specific language you wanted to change, Sean. It's not like it's purposeful. It's just language that has just been around forever. This is a great example of how we can reframe that discussion, and it fits perfectly in alignment with where we're going statewide around demilitarization and the military surplus program. Is that why would we want to invite anybody to assume that we have military style equipment in the form of grenades or grenade launchers, when in fact we don't. We have delivery mechanisms for that gas. Mostly it's hand thrown, but we do have delivery mechanisms. But I agree with you, Bonnie, this is an easy fix and happy to do it.
No. Especially we don't use that term anywhere else. So good to get it out. So the next two sections are really integrally tied together. They're more operational. I don't have any questions on any of them. I'm glad to see Pepper Ball's inclusion. Lindsay?
So this is the only part in here where it sort of refers to body worn. So I'm just going to bring it up again because it's, one of the things that I bring up all the time. But body cams can be obscured by the additional protective equipment. So just to reiterate that I look forward to continual work to problem solve so that body cams are not obscured. And I will say that even when body cams were obscured in the protests in May, the good news was that the audio captured was good. And so, I mean, it's not that it was for nothing, but now that we know it's a problem, right? When gear that is used in crowd control situations obscures body cams, it's good to look for a fix. And then also just that all the teams that are there have body cams. So if SWAT's there, body cams. If street crimes is called out from home, body cams. If canines are called out from home, body cams. Body cams. That's all.
Yeah. Thanks, Lindsay. Excellent. I think that is quite a bit to work with. Thank you, Sergeant Nelson, for joining us on this.
Yeah, my pleasure.
1 minute for any last. Amanda.
Okay, I was just curious. I didn't see it in here if there's maybe this is a different policy, but if there's any sort of like incident debrief that happens after this among the team that responds.
Yeah, I mean, when we have these large scale events like that, there usually is something along those lines. I don't know that we ever typically put that in policy. It's just kind of a practice that we'll typically meet back somewhere and have a discussion about how things went and what went well, what didn't go well, and all that kind of stuff. But it's not something that we normally would put in a policy for that. But I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to it.
Okay, thanks. I don't have a preference either way. I was just curious.
I like that idea. Since cleanup is one of the things that is listed as in this policy, it makes sense a debrief would be too. I also like the assigned officers as needed to ensure problems do not recur after the field force is withdrawn, especially after last time where we had reports of folks around town being targeted reportedly as a result of the protests that occurred at the federal courthouse. I think that's really important to note and to call out. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing the finalized version as we head into next time. Next up on the agenda is determining a retreat date. This will take place in May. There's one of those weekends that's right before Mother's Day. I figured we would want to avoid that Saturday as much as possible. So May 1st, 15th, or 22nd. The other one is really close to Memorial Day, a 3-day weekend that I figured we should let people avoid. And at this retreat, we'll be putting together our work plan for the next 2 years. So a lot of these things that I keep seeming to say, that's not really part of this discussion. As much as I hate doing that, this is where we're going to be putting those on coming up in the next couple of months. I'll be coming back to you guys again with some questions around, layout and format of the meeting. Right now, I'm thinking a 2-hour meeting, an hour for lunch, and then finishing up the 2-hour with another 2-hour meeting. So probably 5 hours on one of these Saturdays. And then if we want to, the first question, I suppose, is what day works for everybody? Is there any strong objection to any of the days, or should I just go with May 1st? Might send it out as a Amanda?
I was just gonna say, for me personally, the earlier in that month, the better, but any of those days work.
Okay. So right now, Dallas, you're muted, but
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, so what you're saying on a Saturday,
mm-hmm.
I'm in retail. So you're saying on a Saturday, 5 hours of Zoom?
Yes, that is what I am asking.
Okay, so is it not okay, so I'll figure it out. It doesn't matter, because if it's any Saturday, unless I'm off, I wouldn't be in a retail scenario doing Zoom for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Actually, Dallas, I think it's 4 because we're doing 1 hour lunch.
I could not do an hour in a retail environment. I could not be at the store. See, is everyone here off on weekends? Yes?
It looks like some yeses, a lot of yeses, but a lot of no's as well. So Saturday is one of those historical things where it's traditionally been on Saturday. It does not absolutely have to be on a Saturday. Figured it was a good starting place because a lot of people have it off. I am not, however, surprised to get objections, and that's one of the reasons I'm bringing it to you guys so early before the meeting, so that we can figure out a good day that works for everybody. And I know
there is to do it evening.
Yeah, and I know people have evening family obligations and work obligations on a standard day there as well.
I've done it before where you did back-to-back weeknights, so 2 hours and 2 hours.
2 hours on I guess nobody's going out to the bars on Fridays these days. So,
as opposed to a Saturday.
As opposed to a Saturday. I worry we might lose some folks between one day and the next, but let me scroll down. So that'd be, if we did it, then I would imagine we'd use the regular May 13th, since that's our usual meeting day anyway. And then May 14th, instead of May 15th. Lindsay?
So some people aren't here. Is there a procedural reason why you can't do a doodle poll?
I don't think so. Jeremy, it'd go out through Jeremy, probably through everybody's emails like normal. It'd be public information, but I don't see any problem with that.
I don't have a doodle poll account, but I could probably get one or find somebody at the city that does, that I could borrow if that was.
You can do it for free, Jeremy.
We don't have that in the budget. Sorry, Jeremy.
You don't have free.
I just haven't done it before, so I'm sure I can figure it out.
That's part of my $2 million strategy is to know.
So one of the
now it's 1,999,000.
I think
glad I'll be contributing there, Chief. So
one of the concerns I have about splitting it up is that a lot of nuance is lost between day 1 and 2. We'd have to recover a lot of ground. between the first day and the next. I imagine if past experience is any indication, instead of 4 hours, it would turn into 6 hours and be 3 hours each day. Would it be possible? I don't know what everybody's work schedule's like. I know we all have a lot of obligations. Would it be?
I just want to say that I like the idea of splitting it because then I could do research in between too. Because I'll get ideas and I'll be like, oh, and then this. Just saying.
And then we'll end up going over everything all over again. Is the that's why I'm saying it'll take longer if we split it up.
I think it's possible to do it in 2 days. I think, we can do a recap and folks can, be responsible for keeping track of where they left off. I think, we can trust folks, right? And I think 1 day of 4 hours sitting in front of a computer, you're going to lose some folks anyway, as far as, concentration and interest. And
so what I'm hearing is that we have an option of 1 day with an hour in the middle or split over 2 days. Nobody would be interested in working a full day and then taking a couple hours off at the end of their day to sit in a 4-hour meeting. So that might be the best place to start. We might turn this into a couple of doodle polls, 1 day versus.
So just do we need a doodle poll? If you guys want to do it in the evening, and you would mention the 13th because everybody's already scheduled for that.
Yeah.
Let's do this. How many folks would prefer to do it on a single day, even if that's a Saturday? Raise your hand. Okay, so that's 5 of us. How many folks would prefer to do it over 2 separate days?
In the evening?
Yes, probably in the evening. So I'm only seeing 3 folks. Dallas, is that not your preference?
No, I have no issue on any day. If you put the day, I'll be there. But
I love your flexibility.
But I'm just saying that the cost to me is well over $300 or $400 personal income, because in retail, that's what we would be attracting on a Saturday for me personally.
Okay. Lindsay?
The reason why I think you should do the doodle poll is because people aren't here. So the people who aren't here can't participate in the discussion. And if something completely different works for them, then they haven't really been considered. So that's why I think we should just pause for a second and ask people to look at their calendars, and rather than trying to do it with a group of people with missing information.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I do intend to do a doodle poll. Right now I'm leaning towards a Saturday though, for historical and personal preference, but I do think it's important to get those perspectives as well. Dallas?
Now see, if this were not COVID or Zoom, and you said, oh, we're going away on a retreat, and could I be gone Saturday? That's a whole different mental. I just, boom, we're meeting up in Florence, or we're meeting up someplace, and we're together in face. That's worth it. Yeah. But to be looking at this little phone, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Jennifer? Whatever we roll, I'll be there.
Thanks,
so
Alice.
I just want to be clear. You asked us which one we prefer, not what we would do. So I would prefer to do it 1 day all at one time. But if you sent me a doodle poll and asked me if I was available the 13th and the 14th, and I would mark it and I would show up. So that's why I think the doodle poll is a good idea, because what I prefer is not important. What I'm willing to do is what's important. So I say we just send it out, and whatever gets the most votes that people can be there,
Right.
and if that's just what we do.
Excellent. Amanda?
I was just going to say, in respect to Dallas and the retail world, maybe a Sunday would be better than a Saturday.
I think that does not pose any problems for me personally. I do worry about community involvement with religious holidays, or not religious holidays, but with church. And as well as commissioner participation. But this is all excellent feedback. The last question I had going into this is whether we want to try to figure out some sort of icebreaker activity It'd probably be an additional half an hour added onto the meeting. I am not going to put my thumb on any scale of this, but there's some benefits and downsides. It'd take additional time. It might be fun. We might get to know each other better. Does anybody have any preference on whether or not we do an icebreaker?
I would prefer to talk about policy. I feel like I'm getting to know you all through the policy. It's very interesting. So
I swear I didn't talk to Bonnie beforehand. I don't like icebreakers. So my thumb's on the scale now, but I'm willing, if folks are really interested, we can either set an icebreaker up for the meeting or for another day. I'm just looking forward to when COVID's over and we can actually go somewhere and talk. Excellent. So doodle poll forthcoming. Keep an eye out for that. We're rolling on to liaison reports. Let's start with you, Lindsay, and then Amanda.
I have one question.
Oh, Dallas. Sorry, Lindsay.
Does Bonnie get an award for finding that grenadiers?
That is actually a very fun and interesting way to do the retreats. We'll have to bring it up as an award for most fun.
How she found that one, I don't know. She did great, and she researched it.
We're gonna figure out which policies you guys are going over, and I'm gonna purposely embed words in there. It's gonna be like a policy word scavenger hunt.
Yeah.
And or bingo. We're gonna do policy bingo, and we'll have a prize.
Excellent. So Lindsay, please take it away with what the CRB is up to.
I don't want to, I mean, after all this, okay. I'll talk about something too. I'll get back to policy, Bonnie, just for you. No, no icebreakers. So last month we looked at 2 different cases, very different cases, but both of which were looking at the de-escalation policy. So I am pleased that the de-escalation policy is something that the auditor is now classifying. So I think we've had the policy in place since 2018, if I'm remembering correctly. And it's something that I'm glad that we haven't always had. But then I was have expressed my discontent many times at CRB meetings that we haven't seen the auditor classify many cases against the de-escalation policy. So we saw a couple and they were really different, and the video was really helpful to watch. My takeaways from that were twofold. One, conversations that I hear lately tend to focus a lot on training, and I care a lot about training, but I care more about outcomes. And so no amount of training is going to guarantee good outcomes when it comes to something like de-escalation. So while I am absolutely in support of continued and ongoing training, I am also really looking forward to a time when we can proactively identify metrics of success for officers so that we can hire, retain, and promote based on metrics that we care about, one of my favorite being de-escalation. And I think that's something that you care about too. When things can be de-escalated beforehand, it's safer for officers, it's safer for community. I mean, it's very difficult set of skills that I value very highly. So that's what I'll say. Training alone and inputs does not equal necessarily good outcomes. So what can we do to figure out how to identify and retain and promote people who are good at things like de-escalation? The other thing that brought up for me, what these cases brought up for me was, and this is coming up at the ad hoc committee meetings too. So, and I brought it up there in some written testimony that I provided, but I have very little concern about the investigations that I see. In fact, I have no concerns about them, I'll be honest. The investigations that I see at the CRB that IA does are extremely thorough. They're well organized. They're very transparent. The work is done to an incredible professional standard. So that's something like that's kind of floating around at the ad hoc table. Some people seem to be concerned about investigations, but there are people who can't see the investigations. I can see them, and I don't have concerns with the investigations. My concerns is with adjudications and with discipline. And so I'll just, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the CRB. This is just me as a human speaking to you as humans, but from a perspective of someone who watches these videos, that it's when there's disagreement between the chief and the auditor on adjudications, it gives me pause. That reduces my confidence in the strength of our system. And without transparency and discipline, and with a disciplinary system that relies on historic precedent, that makes me uncomfortable as well. So if I were to look at when Councilor Zelenka asked questions like, what are the problems you're trying to solve? I'm not concerned with investigations, but I'm concerned about adjudications and I'm concerned about discipline. So those are the problems that I would prefer to solve. And if I had my way, the auditor would have more power when it came to adjudications, and we might have something that looks like a disciplinary matrix that we bargain with the union for when it comes to transparency and discipline, which might allow us to break with using historic precedents. When I think as a community member, I don't think historical discipline is what I consider adequate. So that's my 2 cents about that. The only other thing I'll say is I would love to hear more at some point about the community safety initiative. And as we're continuing to talk about homelessness and prevention, I mean, the last thing I saw was that 7 cents of every dollar is going to be spent on homelessness issues out of that money. That's 7 cents out of the dollar to 60+ cents out of the dollar for police and enforcement. And I think it's worth thinking about those balances when you're talking about ongoing problems. Having sources of ongoing funding, ongoing stable funding, I think is a really big deal, and it's a set of tools we haven't had before. So that's all I'll say for tonight, and thank you all for listening.
Thanks, Lindsay. Amanda?
All right. Let's see. So we have some positions coming open on Human Rights Commission. I think we'll have 2 or 3 positions coming vacant in June. So if you know folks who are interested in applying, please let them know. I'm really hoping, and I know the commission really wants this too, we really want to fill all of those roles with folks who are from BIPOC communities. So the best way we can do that is to get applicants from those communities. So if you can help us promote it, that would be great. Let's see.
Are you the contact?
They can contact me. That's just fine. I can send it to them. Fabio in the Human Rights Neighborhood Involvement Office also, but I can send the link to Sean, and Sean can maybe send it to Ruby too.
So you can also just have folks Google boards and commissions. I think Jennifer put it in the thing earlier where the openings are.
But if anybody has questions about it and they want
city website, boards and commissions, there's a whole page on it.
Yeah, I am reposting that from what Jennifer said earlier.
But I'm super happy to talk to anybody who has questions or.
Yeah, as am I, but I don't think most folks will want to talk to me. I'm not in charge of the commission they'll want to talk to.
Let's see what else we're doing around that. I'm hoping to do a little bit of work with the commission to sort of identify like who do we have and what are some of the skills and knowledge and experience gaps on the commission, so we can see if we can be a little bit strategic with the folks that we recommend to city council to fill those roles. So I'm sort of settling into the role as chair of Human Rights Commission. And one of the things I'm doing is resuming our quarterly meetings with the mayor and the city manager. So we met with the mayor recently and talked through some of the things that we're working on. One of the things we've been working on for a while are poverty and homelessness working group has been working with the city, and with that group is made up of a lot of folks who have lived experience, but also social service providers, folks who are working with homeless populations. So we've been working together to sort of find out ways that we can improve the sweeps and how those are going, and how communication from the city to the social service agencies and the social service agencies that do like a lot of the first responding, to try and improve that communication. And from what I've been hearing from the working group is the communication has been significantly better, not only between the departments of the cities, but between the city and the social service agencies that are able to now, come in and talk to folks and help folks figure out what's their next step, where they're going to go, how are they going to do that. So that's been really nice to see. Our group has appreciated the transparency and the focus that the city's put into it. Through our meetings with the city manager and the mayor, we're making 4 more specific recommendations about how to make more improvements around that, between how the sweeps are conducted and who's able to come and help do some work around that. So that's something we're doing. I think it was already said, but I'll say it again. I think that work group and Human Rights Commission really believes that we need more places for people to go. We just do. We don't have enough places for folks to go. So there's a lot of energy. There's a lot of social service agencies that do, outreach. And we, like my agency personally, we provide tents and hand warmers and water and food and bathrooms and showers and all kinds of different laundry. We work with Carry It Forward for laundry. Like we do all sorts of different things. So the one thing we don't have is somewhere for folks to go. So let's see. Otherwise, we had been working on doing some more work around the use of projectiles and chemical irritants. And our commission has decided to defer to the ad hoc committee around that. So we're not really doing, we sort of put what we were doing on hold. Ad hoc committee is doing their work, and then we'll see what comes out of that, and we may resume there. That being said, the policy we talked about tonight, I'll take to the Human Rights Commission meeting on Tuesday. I'm feeling just a little bit sort of like hamstrung by the resolution that we passed over the summer. And I think that all of this is a little bit more nuanced. So I want to talk to the commission more and see if there's more that we can think about or consider or figure out there. So, and then we did our Martin Luther King Day award. So we presented an award to Linda Hamilton at the NAACP event on Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So that was great. And lastly, we have a new liaison to City Council. So we welcomed Randy Groves at our last meeting, and we're really excited to have him. So that is all I have for now.
Excellent. Thank you. Let's jump into commissioner comments. Let's jump off with Ian and then Lindsay.
No comments from me tonight. Thanks.
Thanks, Ian. Lindsay, and then Bonnie.
Chantel, I really appreciated your comments tonight. So thank you for that. That was something I hadn't considered and I think is really important. So thank you. The other thing I should have told you in my liaison report is this is my last meeting. So you are going to be in the good hands of Michael Hames Garcia, who will be the, we voted on Tuesday, so this is like news, will be your new rep from the Civilian Review Board. And I've enjoyed being with you all, and I'm really exhausted. So I'm gonna, have one less meeting per month. So thank you all for your participation. I really enjoy sitting in a place where people have different opinions and can disagree about stuff, and we can still work together. And I think that those kinds of civic processes are super critical. So thank you all for showing up and being who you are and thinking what you think and sharing them here at this table.
Thanks, Lindsay. Bonnie and then Chantel.
Same thing that Lindsay said. Chantel, thanks for bringing that up. Lindsay, I really appreciate you. I'm really sorry to see you go, but I totally understand. And then now I kind of feel like I would have said, yes, let's do icebreakers so we can get to know you better, but well, fine, never mind. Okay, I don't know how I feel about that anymore. And okay, and then to clarify the field force thing, we're not actually done with that, right? We're going to continue to, because I had like other stuff that I wanted to talk about in field force. Okay, it sounds like we're still gonna talk
It should come back, yes, with
Okay.
the changes we discussed. If you have others, you might want to let Jeremy know in the interim so that we can have that ready to go.
And then just out of curiosity, so like, am I allowed to make like a motion, like for example, to say that I would like the city to declare a state of emergency to allow camping and follow CDC guidelines, because they're CDC guidelines, they know what they're talking about. Is that something I can do?
Yeah, so I think it would be that the police commission recommends this to the city council and to the mayor. And that would essentially, I don't speak for the commission unless the commission tells me what to say. So that would say, sorry?
Can we take a vote or something, or how does that work? Sorry, I'm still learning.
Yeah, so you say, I make this motion, and we can do it this time or we can do it next time. I don't like making motions after the meeting's supposed to be over.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. You're not the first person to do it, and I'm not looking at Jennifer right now. So you're in good footsteps. And that would allow you to compile your thoughts and put together the exact motion you want to make. That would then allow us to move forward with sending a memo to city council and maybe going in front of them to speak on it as well. Dallas, looks like you have a question as well.
No, it's not so much the question. Is that when you're saying for someone to bring up something like she just presented, which is fine. But if I have not researched whatever the said matter is, then I say, you know what, I'm not voting on that.
That is a perfectly legitimate stance to take.
So the point I'm trying to say is this: if we already know that we're given information to read, research, do whatever ahead of the meeting, then we should also ahead of time, maybe through the commissioner to Jeremy, then send me an email. We all have our email stuff that this is getting ready to come up on the table. A motion to do this thing, that I would have proper time to research said matter. And at that point, I can do a yay or an nay.
Okay.
But not just out the blue, something just came up and then boom, I'm voting yay or nay on it.
Yeah, I like that. I think that's best practice from my experience in other forums. I don't want to tie anybody's hands by saying you can't make a motion on the spot, but I very much agree with you, Dallas.
For council, we call it the no surprises rule. So for things like that, which are resolutions or motions to do something that's not directly related to the topic that we're talking about, we have that no surprises rule, which means you need to give people some notice, and you have to give them, and you usually do it the next meeting or something like that. But
that's what I'm.
That doesn't preclude. That's the same thing that
just gives me
Dallas is talking about.
Thanks, Alan. I'm learning stuff too. Thank you, Bonnie, for bringing it up, because this is an opportunity for me to learn too.
Okay, so I'll write something up.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. And I'll make some time on it for the next agenda. I'll take this as notice that we're going to be talking about it. Chantel and then V.
Thank you, Lindsay, and you will be missed. I really enjoy your insights as well. And especially, I think you brought up a really good topic that we haven't talked about a lot, but it's accountability, and accountability by the EPD is what people want to see. So I think the topic you brought up about adjudication stuff is really important and something that needs to be discussed for sure. That was pretty much it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chantel. V and then Jennifer. You're mute. Okay.
Thanks. Basically wanted to thank you for all the discussions we've had that we shared. And I think you brought a lot to the table as far as, the time period that I've known you, which is, about a couple of years. Yeah, it's just, you're incredibly insightful and incredibly intelligent. And I think a little bit of it, might have rubbed off, I hope. I want to wish you, best of luck in your next endeavor. Thank you.
Thanks, V. Jennifer, and then Dallas.
Thanks. Well, Lindsay, I'm assuming you're a little embarrassed right now getting all of this praise. You're such a modest person that I know you're just like, oh no. But I have found you to be incredibly thoughtful, and our conversations here and privately have been very helpful to me. And I'm sure that those will not end just because you won't be here at this table. So I look forward to that. And I just wanted to bring up something that Lindsay did say about basing things on historic precedent. As someone who works with history a lot, that's clearly not a great idea, considering we always get better at things, right? And we always learn new stuff. So looking backwards is not always the best way to do things. So I look forward to maybe how we can hear about that here and how that fits in with policy. I'm not really sure what our role with that would be, but it does also concern me. And I am looking forward to what Bonnie brings forward. I'm always interested in looking at things a second time or looking at things a different way. And I hope you can be specific in your recommendations, because that's very helpful. And so, yeah, so I just look forward to what you come up with.
Thanks, Jennifer. Dallas, and then Amanda.
Yeah, I want to begin by saying thank you, Lindsay, meeting you. And there's two things that I will think when I think of your name and what you brought to this group, and I will definitely keep that on as the de-escalating and then also transparency. Those are the two things that you put a little mark on me, and I 100% agree. And I will repeat those things. I will sing those things. And the next thing is I definitely want to know more about this homeless operation team and how that can be strengthened to make it less a burden for police as far as strategy or policy or whatever that comes out of that. And just as a person from the business side, I don't think anybody on that homeless operation team owns buildings here in town. I don't think anybody on that homeless operation team owns a lot of land here in town. So if you don't bring people who own these things to maybe open up shelters, open up buildings, when you walk around downtown, there's a lot of buildings that are open. They're owned by somebody. Why couldn't that be a mock homeless area or a transitionary area? So I want to learn more about that. And then we brought up that name, Chris McAllister. And what is his position?
He is chair of a similar board at the county to homelessness. He also works in his personal life extensively on the ground. He's been involved for 10 plus years. He's formerly homeless himself.
That's a great resource, I think.
Thank you.
That's it.
Amanda, and then Alan.
Yeah, so Lindsay, it's been great getting to know you, and you will be missed. I really enjoyed your perspective on the commission. And Bonnie, I was going to say our Human Rights Commission's Poverty and Homelessness Work Group has done work around asking City Council to declare states of emergency before. So if you want information, they did a ton of research around what does that mean and what does that get you. So if you want to talk more about that, we can.
Excellent. Alan, and then myself.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I did want to thank Lindsay for her work on the Police Commission. I always found your comments insightful and well thought through and very helpful perspective in the conversation. So I think you added quite a bit. We're going to miss you. And you really screwed over the guy that's going to follow you because the bar is set too high. So he's going to come in here and we're all going to be expecting that kind of level of stuff. And he's going to be, what?
Thanks, Alan. So I've got a few comments. One is on the same sort of civil law deference to precedent, which undoubtedly helps white supremacy continue in hidden corners of the way laws are carried out, and where that intersects with us. So this was already on my list of things to talk about. Didn't have a good solution for it. But in the field force policy, it talks about one of the factors to consider the past violence of similar incidents before this. And that sort of thing can create self-fulfilling prophecies, which I think we are more aware of. I don't have answers for it, but it's one of the ways in which exactly what Lindsay is talking about is carried out here in the policies that we will continue to look at. So I would, if Ryan's still there, appreciate a more in-depth rubric on what looks likely to result in violence. But other than that, that's something I should have brought up earlier. And thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to looking at Field Force again, probably not next month, but soon. And with that, the meeting is concluded, and thank you all for staying a little bit late.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.